Diddy jumps on his adopted white daughter being found. Terrence Howard exposes Diddy's whole secret. In the spring of 2020, while the world was locked behind doors and fear ruled the streets, music mogul Sean Diddy Combs went live on Instagram. He wasn't there to promote an album. He wasn't teasing a tour. He introduced something far more unexpected. A girl. A little white girl with nervous eyes standing next to him, wringing her fingers. She looked out of place not because of her skin, but because of the silence surrounding her. "What's your name?" Diddy asked on camera. She blinked. "Ava." He smiled. "What's your full name?" "Ava Baron Combs," she answered. He beamed with pride. "She's my daughter now. Just like Madonna adopted those beautiful kids. I did the same." At first the internet applauded. It looked like a rescue, a powerful man using his privilege to protect a vulnerable child. But within weeks something felt wrong. There were no follow-up posts. No birthday pictures, no holiday photos, no first day of school smiles. Ava disappeared. Some assumed she'd returned to her biological parents. Others whispered that the adoption was never legal to begin with. A few online sleuths noticed that she was always positioned beside Diddy's sons in that single video, never the daughters. But most people forgot, until now. In 2025, 5 years later, a storm hit federal courtrooms like lightning over dry brush. One name kept echoing through the corridors of the FBI's investigation into sex trafficking, racketeering, and child exploitation. Sean Combs. What had started as a series of civil lawsuits from former partners turned into something darker, wider, and more disturbing. And deep inside the sealed indictments, one name reappeared. Ava Baron Combs. She wasn't just a side character in an Instagram fairy tale. She was missing. And now she was presumed a victim. That's when a quiet but relentless force entered the picture. Kash Patel, former chief of staff at the Department of Defense, now special prosecutor appointed by the FBI to lead a classified investigation into high-level celebrity-linked trafficking. Patel doesn't talk like a politician. He talks like a man carrying files the world isn't ready to open. And when he opened one of those files, the headlines went nuclear. No legal documentation connects Ava Baron to Sean Combs, Patel stated. There was no adoption. There was no guardianship. There was only access. The media gasped, but insiders weren't shocked. The silence around Ava hadn't been peaceful. It had been strategic. Meanwhile, another voice came forward, louder than headlines and heavier than speculation. Terrence Howard, an award-winning actor, a man who had spent decades navigating Hollywood's elite, a man who had once accepted an invitation from Diddy and never went back. At a press hearing, he dropped the line that would light social media on fire. He didn't want me to coach his acting. He wanted me compromised. He said it plainly, without flourish, without drama. And that made it even worse. In a later interview, Howard revealed that his assistant had once warned him about Diddy's true intentions, and then hinted that the girl seen in that live stream might have been part of a setup. She wasn't adopted, he said. She was trapped. The press scrambled. Investigators shifted gears. And in one explosive moment, the FBI confirmed what had long been feared. Ava Baron was real, alive, and had just been rescued. She had been found in the outskirts of Las Vegas during a sting operation that targeted a sprawling trafficking network with deep ties to entertainment, luxury, real estate, and private security firms. 4 minors were rescued that night. One of them gave a name, Ava. It didn't take long before that name rang through federal channels like an alarm. Patel was notified. Howard was stunned. And the country finally began to pay attention. Ava was 14 now. She had been missing from public view since she was 9. She had no passport, no school record, no medical history after 2020, but she had one thing, her memory. In a protected deposition, Ava confirmed what many feared. She had never been adopted. She had never lived with Diddy as a family. She had only been with him for a short time, and then passed on. to whom that part remained sealed. But the charges against Diddy began to crystallize: racketeering, fraudulent guardianship, child trafficking, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, and one more: use of media platforms for criminal cover. The live stream wasn't an act of charity, it was a distraction. Long before the live stream, long before the headlines, long before anyone whispered the name Ava Baron, Gene Deal had already seen too much. He wasn't a journalist, he wasn't an FBI agent. He was Diddy's right hand for over a decade. His job was simple: protect the boss. No questions, no judgment, no leaks. But over time, the silence started to choke him. Gene watched everything: the parties, the strange guests, the doors that were always locked, the names that weren't allowed to be spoken in front of staff, and most of all, the looks on the faces of people who left those rooms. He didn't need a badge to know something was wrong. I used to think he just wanted control, Gene told a private panel of investigators. But looking back, it was more than that. It was strategic. When Diddy brought Ava on camera in 2020, Gene was there just off screen. He remembers the tension in the room, how Ava wouldn't make eye contact, how she stumbled on her own last name, how Diddy interrupted her when she paused too long. That wasn't a father and daughter, Gene said. That was a director and a prop. After the live stream, Gene says he didn't see Ava again, not once, not at the mansion, not at events, not even in whispers. And that's when alarm bells rang. Gene asked questions, too many. One morning he found his office reassigned. The security codes on the estate had changed. His badge didn't work. The message was clear: get out or disappear. So he left. But he didn't forget. And when the news broke in 2025 that Ava had been found alive during a trafficking bust outside Las Vegas, Gene didn't hesitate. He called Kash Patel directly. "I know what this is," he said. "I've been sitting on it for years. I'm ready." Kash Patel moved fast. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a tactician. In just 3 months, he coordinated sealed warrants, subpoenaed Diddy's inner circle, and quietly flipped 2 former employees, both tied to private jet bookings, linked to Ava's movement between states. The FBI raided multiple Diddy-owned properties, including a luxury cabin in Montana and a shell company's downtown penthouse in New York. What they found shocked even hardened agents: burner phones, dozens of hard drives, handwritten notes listing initials and travel routes, an encrypted folder labeled Optics Assets, and inside a hidden safe, a sealed envelope marked AB, Photos, 2020, NDAs, Archive. Patel didn't sleep that night. He had built major federal cases before, but nothing like this. "This isn't a Hollywood scandal," he told his team. "This is systemic predation with a media strategy." Publicly, Diddy said nothing. Privately, his legal team scrambled. Within days, one of his attorneys resigned. Another issued a vague statement claiming Mr. Combs has always been an advocate for children. But pressure was rising, because someone else had started talking. Diddy's former partner, singer, survivor. She had filed a separate lawsuit years before detailing coercion surveillance and forced participation in disturbing events she called freak-offs. At the time, the public brushed it off as a toxic relationship. But now, with Ava's rescue, her testimony looked like a roadmap. She described rooms with cameras, guests who were told to leave their phones at the door, young girls recruited for appearances never to be seen again, and worst of all, a hidden library of footage used as leverage. "I wasn't allowed to leave," she had written. "If I refused, he'd show the tapes." When investigators compared dates and locations from Cassie's notes with Ava's estimated timeline, they found disturbing overlaps. Same city, same parties, same names. And suddenly Ava's silence made perfect sense. Meanwhile, Terrence Howard made a quiet move behind the scenes. He visited Ava in protective custody, not to interrogate, just to be there. He was the one who had first raised the alarm. the one who had said the quiet part out loud that Diddy wasn't adopting children, he was accessing them. Terrence didn't want publicity. He didn't call the press. He signed a temporary guardianship order, allowing Ava to stay in a private recovery facility under his name. Legally, he was now her advocate. Emotionally, he was her shield. She needed someone with no angle, he said. Someone with nothing to gain. But Diddy wasn't done. In a bold, defiant move, his team issued a motion to suppress the evidence collected by Patel, claiming unlawful surveillance and character assassination. They cited celebrity persecution and media-fueled witch hunts. But the courts weren't convinced, because by then a second survivor had come forward, and she wasn't anonymous. She was Diddy's former assistant, the same one who had booked Ava's travel, the same one who had carried her backpack at rehearsals, and she had a story of her own. She walked into the federal building alone. No entourage, no sunglasses, no lawyer at her side. Just a slim folder and a look that said, "I'm done being silent." Her name was Camille Rivers, a name that had appeared only once in tabloids years ago as a celebrity assistant for Diddy's tour operations. Back then, people thought she was just another staffer, managing wardrobe fittings and coffee runs. But inside the FBI's trafficking investigation, she was something else entirely, the missing piece. Camille had joined Combs Entertainment in late 2019. By early 2020, she was managing logistics for special guests. The job was vague, but the pay was excellent. Too excellent. When she asked about the extra wire transfers, she was told, "You're protecting the brand. That's priceless." In February 2020, Camille was told to coordinate a pickup from a downtown LA shelter. No name was provided, just a pickup window, a bag of clothing, and a preloaded debit card. When she arrived, a young girl was waiting outside with a social worker. That girl was Ava. She looked confused, Camille recalled, like no one had explained anything to her. She was told it was a celebrity adoption project, something for PR, a goodwill stunt. Camille had doubts, but she stayed quiet. "I thought maybe I was paranoid, but when I saw how quickly Ava disappeared after that live stream, I knew." Now 5 years later, she had proof. Inside Camille's folder was a 3-page travel ledger, not official, handwritten. It documented hotel stays, flights, and alias names, used to book Ava's transportation between properties. Dates aligned precisely with what Ava described during her deposition. One note read, 3R12, send AB plus JC to NY via Hawthorne Jet. No press, no staff. The initials were clear, Ava Barron and Justin Combs. Another read, room 204, she stays locked down until after the set call. Camille had made copies years ago, unsure of what she was looking at, but something told her to save them, and now, with Ava alive, she finally knew why. Her testimony brought the case into sharp focus. The DOJ upgraded charges from suspicion of trafficking to criminal conspiracy across state lines. The evidence Camille provided was cross-verified with a private security firm's discarded server logs retrieved during an unrelated tax audit, and what they found was devastating. At least 7 minors had been transported under false names between 2019 and 2022. Ava was listed 3 times under the alias L.B. Carter, once under Michelle Crown, once chillingly just as A. The pattern was clear: use social causes as cover, create the optics of rescue, then vanish the paper trail and the girl. Camille also revealed that staff were made to sign personal NDAs when dealing with Ava. Not corporate NDAs, personal ones drafted by Diddy's private counsel. These weren't confidentiality agreements, Camille said. These were silencers. She still had her copy. As Kash Patel reviewed her testimony, he noticed a subtle but explosive detail. Every transaction related to Ava was run through a shell nonprofit called the Crown Future Initiative, supposedly aimed at supporting youth in crisis. It never filed tax records. It never published a single report. But it had received $1.2 million in donations within its first 2 months, all traceable to Diddy's network. Using forensic accountants, Patel traced payments from that nonprofit to a Malibu rental house known as the Safe House, a fleet of black SUVs leased under Crown Logistics Inc., a tech consultant in Miami who had scrubbed metadata from Ava's livestream. One by one, the dots connected, and in the middle of the diagram was a circle labeled ABC. Camille's decision to come forward triggered a chain reaction. Another ex-employee and audio tech who once handled DJ systems for private events contacted authorities anonymously. He remembered seeing Ava in the background of a rehearsal party hosted in Miami. She was wearing headphones, sitting on a bench, not dancing, not smiling, just waiting, and then she was gone. That same night, one of the VIP guests had requested more space and less chatter code used by staff to clear rooms of witnesses before private meetings. That phrase now appears in 2 separate lawsuits from other survivors, both citing eerily similar patterns of forced isolation. But Camille's impact didn't stop with testimony. She gave Patel the names of 3 current staffers who had access to flight manifests, burner phone records, and financial logs. One of them flipped, fast. He gave Patel a hard drive. Inside it were time-stamped video stills of Ava boarding private aircraft. Metadata tracked communications about guest movement. A PDF of Ava's forged guardianship letter dated just days before the livestream. The document was fake. No judge signed it. No agency approved it. But it bore the Combs family address, and it named Sean Combs as legal acting guardian for Ava B. Combs. That was all the FBI needed. A new federal warrant was signed within 48 hours. Diddy's Montana compound was raided again this time, with Ava listed as a primary named victim. He wasn't home, but his encrypted server was. Inside agents found surveillance footage, dozens of files, some labeled, others not. One folder was titled Archive Optics VC. Inside it, Ava's 2020 livestream file, date-stamped and tagged with performance notes. One line stood out. Remind her to say she has 2 last names. Clean audio. Use a soft filter. At first, they denied everything. Diddy's attorneys issued sweeping denials. His PR team went on damage control. His fans flooded social media, calling it a smear campaign. But inside the walls of his empire, something darker was happening. People were flipping. Not because they were angry, not because they were threatened, because the weight of what they knew could no longer be buried beneath contracts and cash. The fortress was cracking, and the first big break didn't come from an enemy. It came from his son. Christian Combs had grown up in the shadow of a legend. Lavish parties, designer stages, paparazzi at every corner, but as Diddy's public image grew darker, Christian began to distance himself. He stopped attending family events, deleted dozens of old posts, and moved quietly to Miami under a private LLC name where he hired his own legal team separate from his father's. Then, in a quiet, sealed deposition, Christian made a move that shocked everyone, even federal prosecutors. He handed over a burner phone, the same model Camille Rivers had described, the same number used to coordinate Ava's media appearances, the same device logged in Crown Future Initiative's booking records. Inside were messages, dozens, some casual, she's ready. Room 312, no press tonight, same drill. AB's meds are in the glove box. Others, chilling. Get her out before sunrise. She's looking tired. Can someone fix that before we go live? Don't let her talk to the dancers again. Some were time-stamped just hours before the 2020 livestream, and many of them were sent from Sean Combs' own number. Christian claimed he had no part in coordinating Ava's movement, but admitted he was told not to ask questions when it came to certain guests. Everything was about optics, he told investigators. The rest didn't matter. He said the only reason he held on to the burner phone was guilt and fear, not fear of exposure, fear of what would happen to Ava if no one ever came forward. When asked why he chose now, he replied simply, because she's alive. His testimony didn't absolve him, but it sent a signal. The wall of silence was collapsing. Elsewhere, Gene Deal returned for a second interview with federal prosecutors, this time with video evidence. He had smuggled a flash drive from Diddy's NYC compound before resigning in 2021, afraid to release it, terrified to hold on to it. Now, with Ava safe and protected, he handed it over. It contained 2 hours of silent security footage, no audio, just grainy black and white frames. But one segment stood out. Ava, walking down a hallway, alone, followed closely by a man in his 30s, later identified as a Combs Entertainment associate, now under separate investigation. Gene pointed to the screen. That's not security, that's escort. You don't follow a child like that unless you're moving a product. The implication was brutal, but it matched Camille's notes and Ava's sworn testimony. Now prosecutors had Ava's voice, Camille's ledger, Gene's footage, and Christian's burner phone, all painting the same picture. Diddy hadn't adopted Ava. He'd paraded her, manipulated her image, erased her name, and moved her like cargo. But the tipping point came from someone even closer to the core. Jamal Briggs, a former tour coordinator, longtime loyalist, one of the few people who had been with Diddy since the early Bad Boy Records era. He was known as the Fixer, the guy who made problems disappear. Silent, efficient, never public. But after Christian's deposition, Jamal reached out to Kash Patel directly. He didn't bring files, he brought a story. In 2020, just after Ava's live stream, Jamal was told to relocate her for media quiet. He flew her to an isolated Airbnb outside Aspen, Colorado. No press, no phone signals. She was scared. She wouldn't eat, he said. And when I asked why I had to be there for 3 nights, they told me, just make sure she doesn't leave. Jamal didn't know the full picture back then, but what haunted him was the moment he left. He wasn't told where Ava was going next. He wasn't given a return flight for her. She just vanished. It's like she was never real, he told Patel, like she was a prop you pack up once the scene ends. Patel took his statement seriously, and within days, prosecutors expanded the case. The new charges: interstate trafficking of a minor, use of shell charities for criminal transport, fraudulent identity creation, emotional and physical endangerment of a protected class, and one chilling count: digital grooming and live stream exploitation for public manipulation. This last charge shook the industry, because it wasn't just about Ava anymore. It was about how the media had been used to cover up trafficking under the guise of celebrity altruism. That single live stream in 2020, once dismissed as quirky, was now considered a digital crime scene, and Diddy, he was nowhere to be found. His legal team stalled, his inner circle fractured, his empire trembled. But outside the media buzz, Ava watched everything from a quiet recovery home. Terrence Howard visited weekly. He never asked questions, he just brought books, calm, time. One afternoon, Ava finally spoke. They said no one would believe me, she whispered. He shook his head. They were wrong. For months, the investigation had lived in shadows-sealed courtrooms, off-the-record interviews, and encrypted files, buried deep inside federal vaults. But on May 3, 2025, the U.S. District Court authorized the unsealing of Case 24 FBI 8803, United States versus Sean Combs. The charges, laid out in a 72-page document, were read aloud in court: trafficking of minors across state lines, fraudulent guardianship and forged adoption papers, racketeering involving shell charities, coercive media manipulation through live-streamed events, obstruction of justice and evidence suppression. One name appeared repeatedly under the heading Primary Victim A, Ava Baron Combs. The media went into overdrive. Networks cleared primetime slots. News tickers flashed breaking for 72 hours straight. Talk shows, podcasts, live streams, all asking the same question: What really happened to the girl Diddy claimed to adopt? Clips from the 2020 livestream resurfaced. The awkward pauses, the way Diddy interrupted her, her confusion over her own name. "What's your last name? Ava Combs." No, your other last name, Barron." The moment now haunted every viewer. It no longer looked like a child getting used to a new name. It looked like a child being trained to lie. In the background, Kash Patel prepared for the next stage. The FBI had gathered all it could. Now the Department of Justice needed a witness, not just documents or metadata. They needed Ava's voice. And despite her age, despite the trauma, she said yes. Terrence Howard sat beside her during prep sessions. Never coached, never pressured, just a present. He was her constant. She doesn't need to prove herself, he told prosecutors. She already survived. The courtroom was packed the day Ava gave her testimony. The press wasn't allowed in, but transcripts would later be released. She took the stand wearing a gray cardigan, her hair pulled back simply. She didn't look like a viral mystery. She looked like a teenage girl trying to breathe. Her first words were quiet but clear. "I want to speak because no one did when it mattered." She described how she had met Diddy through what she was told was a youth mentorship program. She was living in a temporary shelter. No family, no legal guardian. A caseworker had filled out the wrong forms and her file was lost in a backlog. Then someone arrived. A woman with styled hair and sunglasses. She said I was lucky. She said someone important wanted to help me. That someone was Sean Combs. From there, Ava recounted everything, being picked up in a black SUV with tinted windows. Being told to smile on camera during the live stream, even if she didn't understand. Being told to act grateful and say he adopted you. How she never saw a lawyer, never signed papers, never attended school again. Her voice shook when she got to what happened after the live stream. "They told me I couldn't go outside. They said I was special and needed protection. But then I stopped seeing the same people. I was always somewhere new." She described the homes, the penthouse with no windows, the ranch with cameras in every hallway, the hotel room where she wasn't allowed to speak unless spoken to. Each location matched addresses already flagged in Patel's investigation. And then came the hardest part. The judge asked Ava if she remembered anyone trying to help her. She nodded. "There was one man. He gave me snacks and left the door open by accident." That man was later identified as Jamal Briggs, the tour coordinator, who had testified in Part 4. "I think he wanted me to run," she said. "But I was afraid there was nowhere to run to." Tears filled the room, even among hardened court officials. Ava wasn't just a witness now. She was the beating heart of the entire case. After the hearing, prosecutors confirmed her statements aligned with 17 verified data points, flight logs, facial recognition timestamps, entry codes at 3 Combs-owned properties, messages from Christian's burner phone, Camille's ledger. Everything matched, but even with evidence stacked a mile high, the case wasn't done, because Diddy was still missing. His lawyers claimed he was in the Caribbean on personal business, but flight records showed no such departure. Interpol issued a preliminary alert, and Kash Patel was furious. "You don't get to disappear when a child finds her voice. We will bring him back." In the meantime, the FBI moved to freeze assets tied to Combs' Entertainment Crown Future Initiative and 8 affiliated shell companies. Over $32 million was placed in temporary federal custody, with a portion reserved for reparations and long-term care for the identified survivors. Ava, now under full protective guardianship, would receive trauma support education and legal access for as long as she needed. But it wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, the internet exploded again. 50 Cent released the trailer for his upcoming documentary, Did He Do It? In it, clips from Ava's livestream played over chilling narration. They called it charity, but the truth was bought, sold, and silenced. The final shot, a file folder marked ABC, being zipped into an FBI evidence bag.